Welcome back to another narration video. In this video I will be reading Aesop Fables together with some soothing and relaxing rain and thunder sounds. I have picked out a few of the Aesop Fables that I really like and I hope you will like them as well. Please consider leaving a like, a comment and subscribe to the channel if you would like to see more of this. If it's well received, I may do another one of the Aesop Fables or another narration. Hope you will enjoy it. Hope you will have a relaxing time, maybe a bedtime.
The Fox and the Stork. A fox one day invited a stork to dine with him, and wishing to be amused at his expense, put the soup which he had for dinner in a large flat dish, so that while he himself could lap it up quite easily, the stork could only dip in the tips of his long bill. Some time after, the stork, bearing his treatment in mind, invited the fox to take dinner with him. He, in his turn, put some minced meat in a long, narrow-necked vessel, into which he could easily put his bill, while Master Fox was forced to be content with licking what ran down the sides of the vessel. The fox then remembered his old trick, and could not but admit that the stork had well paid him out. A joke is often returned with interest. Jupiter and the Camel. The camel, once upon a time, complained to Jupiter that he was not as well served as he ought to be in the means of defense and offense. The bull, he said, has horns, the boar tusks, and the lion and tiger formidably claws and fangs that make them feared and respected on all sides. I, on the other hand, have to put up with the abuse of all those who choose to insult me. Jupiter angrily told him that if he would take the trouble to think, he would see that he was given qualities shared by no other beast, and that as a punishment for his foolish complaint, his ears should be shortened. Individuals do not always know what is best for them. The Dog and the Oyster. The Dog and the Oyster. A dog used to eating eggs saw an oyster, and opening his mouth to the widest extent, swallowed it down with the utmost relish, supposing it to be an egg. Soon afterwards, suffering great pain in his stomach, he said, "I deserve all this torment for my folly in thinking that everything round must be an egg." They who act with sufficient thought will often fall into unsuspected danger. The Woman and the Hen. A woman had a hen that laid an egg every day. The fowl was of a superior breed, and the eggs were very fine and sold for a good price. The woman thought that by giving the hen twice as much food as she had been in the habit of giving, the bird might be brought to lay 2 eggs a day instead of 1. So the quantity of food was doubled. The hen thereupon grew very fat and stopped laying altogether. Figures are not always facts. The Wolf and the Lamb. A hungry wolf one day saw a lamb drinking at a stream below him and wished to find an excuse for eating her. "What do you mean by muddying the water I'm going to drink?" said it fiercely to the lamb. Pray forgive me, meekly answered the lamb. I should be sorry in any way to displease you, but as the stream runs from you towards me, you will see that I am not to blame. That is very well, said the wolf. But you know you spoke ill of me behind my back a year ago. Nay, believe me, replied the lamb. I was not then born. It must have been your brother then, growled the wolf. It cannot have been, for I never had any, answered the lamb. I know it was one of your lot, rejoined the wolf, so make no more such idle excuse. He then seized the poor lamb, carried her off to the woods, and ate her. The wicked always find an excuse for wrongdoings. Jupiter and the bee. A bee made Jupiter a present of a pot of honey, which was so kindly taken that the god bade her to ask what she would, and that it should be granted to her. The bee then desired that whatever she could set her sting in, it might wound to the death. Jupiter was loath to leave mankind at the mercy of a spiteful little insect, and was annoyed at the ill nature of her wish. He therefore said that while for his promise sake he would give her this power to harm, she must be careful how she uses the power, for where she planned her sting, she would leave it, and with it lose her life. Evil brings evil in return. The wolf, the she-goat, and the kid. A she-goat, leaving her house one morning to look for food, told her kid to bolt the door and not open to one who did not give the password, a plague on the wolf and all his tribe. A wolf who was lurking about, unseen by the goat, heard her words, and when she was gone, came and tapped on the door, and imitating her voice, and said, "A plague on the wolf and all his tribe." He made sure that the door would be open at once, but the kid, whose suspicion were aroused, replied, "Show me your beard, and I will let you in at once." Double proof is surest. The bat and the weasels. A weasel seized upon a bat, who begged hard for her life. "No, no," said the weasel, "I give no quarter to birds." "Birds?" cried the bat. "I am not a bird, I'm a mouse, look at my body." And so she got off that time. A few days after, she fell into the clutches of another weasel. The bat cried for mercy. "No," said the weasel, "no mercy for a mouse." "But," said the bat, "you can see on my wings that I'm a bird." And she escaped that time as well. It is good to have two strings to one's bow. The dogs and the hides. Some dogs, famished with hunger, saw some cow hides steeping in the river. Not being able to reach them, they agreed to drink up the river. But it fell out that they burst themselves with drinking long before they could reach the hides. Attempt not impossibilities. The wanton calf. A calf full of play and wantonness, seeing an ox at a plough, could not forbear insulting him. "What a sorry old drudge you are," he said, "to bear that heavy yoke upon your neck, and with a plough on your tail all day, to go turning up the ground for a master. You're a wretched slave, and know no better, or you would not do it. See what a happy life I lead. I go where I please, sometimes in the cool shade, sometimes in the warm sunshine, and whenever I like, I drink the clear running brook. The ox, not at all moved by this address, went on quietly and calmly with his work, and in the evening, when unjoked and going to take his rest, he saw the calf being led off by the butcher. He pitied him, but could not help saying as he passed, "Now, friend, whose condition is the better, your or mine?" Youth and folly often live together. The fighting cocks. 2 cocks fought over sovereignty of the farming yard. One was severely beaten and ran and hid himself in a hole. The conqueror flew to the top of the outhouse. There he clapped his wings and crowed out, "Victory!" Just then an eagle made a swoop, seized him and carried him off. The other, seeing this from his hiding place, came out, shaking off the recollection of his late disgrace, stuttered about among his hens with all the dignity imaginable. Fear success with moderation. The lion's share. The lion and several other beasts once agreed to live peacefully together in the forest, sharing equally all the spoils of hunting. One day a fine fat stag fell into a snare set by the goat, who thereupon called the rest together. The lion divided the stag into 4 parts. Taking the best pieces for himself, he said, "This is mine, of course, as I am the lion." Taking another portion, he added, "This too is mine by right. The right, if you must know, of the strongest." Further, putting aside the 3rd piece, "That's for the most valiant," said he. "And as for the remaining part, touch it if you dare. Might makes right." The ass, the ape, and the mole. An ass and an ape were one day grumbling together over their grievances. "My ears are so long that people laugh at me," said the ass. "I wish I had horns like the ox." "And I," said the ape, "am really ashamed to turn my back upon anyone. Why should not I have a fine bushy tail as well as saucy fellow the fox?" "Hold your tongues, both of you," said the mole, that overheard them, "and be thankful what you have. The pole moles have no horns at all, no tail to speak of, and are nearly blind as well. We should never complain so long as there are others worse off than ourselves." The lion, the tiger, and the fox. A lion and a tiger happened to come together over a dead body of a fawn that had been recently shot. A fierce battle ensued, and each animal was in the prime of his age and strength. The combat was long and furious. At last they lay stretched on the ground, panting, bleeding, and exhausted, each unable to lift a paw against the other. An impudent fox, coming by at the time, stepped in and carried off before their eyes the prey on account of which they both have fought so savagely. "Woe betide us," said the lion, "that we should suffer so much to serve a fox. It often happens that one has the toil and another the profit." The cat and the mice. A certain house was much infested by mice. The owner brought home a cat, a famous mouser, who soon made such a havoc among the little folks that those who were left stayed closely in the upper shelves. Then the cat grew hungry and thin, and driven to her wits' end, hung by her hind legs from a peg in the wall, and pretended to be dead, in order that the mice would no longer be afraid to come near her. An old mouse come to the edge of the shelf, and seeing through the trick, cried, "Ah, ah, Mrs. Pussy, we should not come near you, even if your skin were stuffed with straw. Old birds are not to be caught with chaff." The two frogs. Two frogs lived in the same pool. The hot summer came and dried it up, so they were forced to set forth in search for another water. As they went along, they chanced to find a deep well full of cool water. "Let us jump in here," cried one of the frogs. "Wait a bit," said the other. "If that should dry up, could we get out again?" Easier in than out. The peacock's complaint. The peacock complained to Juno that while everyone laughed at his voice, an insignificant creature like the nightingale had a note that delighted all listeners. Juno, angrily at the unreasonableness of her favorite bird, scolded him in the following terms: "Envious bird that you are, I am sure you have no cause to complain. On your neck shine all the colors of the rainbow, and your extended tail gleams like a mass of gems. No living being has ever a good thing to its own share. The falcon is endowed with swiftness, the eagle strength, the parrot speech, the raven the gift of augury, and nightingale a melodious note, while you have both size and beauty. Cease then to complain, or the gift that you have shall be taken away." Contentment should be the source of every joy. The man and his two wives. In a country where men could have more than one wife, a certain man whose head was fast becoming white had two, one a little older than himself and one much younger. The younger wife, being of a gay and lively turn, did not want people to think she had an old man for a husband, and so used to pull out as many of his white hairs that she could. The old wife, on the other hand, did not wish to seem older than her husband, and so used to pull out all the black hairs. This went on until between them both they made the poor man quite bald. No man can belong to two parties at once. The countryman and the snake. A countryman, one frosty day in the depths of winter, found a snake under a hedge almost dead with the cold. Taking pity on the poor creature, he brought it home and laid it in the hearth near the fire. Revived by the heat, it reared itself up, and with a dreadful hissing flew at the wife and children of its benefactor. The countryman, hearing the cries, rushed in, and seizing a mattock, soon cut the snake in two pieces. "Vile wretch," he said, "is this the reward you make to him who saved your life? Die as you deserve, but in a single death is too good for you. Ingratitude is a crime." The two crabs. "My dear," called out an old crab to her daughter one day, "why do you sidle along in an awkward manner? Why don't you go forward like other people?" "Well, mother," answered the young crab, "it seems to me that I go exactly like you do." Go first and show me how, and I will gladly follow. Example is better than precept. The Hawk and the Nightingale. A nightingale once fell into the clutches of a hungry hawk, who had been all day on the lookout for food. "Pray let me go," said the nightingale. "I am such a mite for a stomach like yours. I sing so nicely too. Do let me go. It will do you good to hear me." "Much good it will do in an empty stomach," replied the hawk. "And beside, a little bird that I have is more to me than a great one that has yet to be caught. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush." The body and its members. The members of the body once rebelled against him. They said he led an idle, lazy life at their expense. The hands declared that they would not again lift a crust even to keep him from starving. The mouth that it would not take in a bit more food. The legs that they would carry him about no longer. And so on with the others. The body quietly allowed them to follow their own courses, while knowing that they would all soon come to their senses, as indeed they did, when, for want of the blood and nourishment supplied from the stomach, they found themselves fast becoming mere skin and bone. No one can live to himself, but must take account for his neighbor's needs. The spendthrift and the swallow. A prodigal young fellow who had run through all his money and even sold all his outer clothes except his cloak, saw a swallow skimming over the meadows one fine day in the early spring. Believing that summer was really come, he sold his cloak too. The next morning there happened to be a severe frost, and shivering and nearly frozen himself, he found the swallow lying stiff and dead upon the ground. He thereupon upbraided the poor bird as the cause of all his misfortunes. "Stupid thing," he said, "had you not come before your time, I should not now be so wretched." Be not ready to believe rumors. The stag at the pool. A stag drinking at a clear pool admired the handsome look of his spreading antlers, but was much displeased at the slim and ungainly appearance of his legs. "What a glorious pair of branching horns," he said. "How gracefully they hang over my forehead. What a fine air they give my face. But as for my spindly shank of legs, I am heartily ashamed of them." The words were scarcely out of his mouth when he saw some huntsmen and a pack of hounds making towards him. His despised legs soon placed him at a distance from his followers, but on entering the forest his horns got entangled at every turn, so that the dogs soon reached him and made an end of him. "Fool that I was," he gasped at his last breath. "Had it not been for these wretched horns, my legs would have saved my life." Beauty may have a fair leaves and bitter fruit. The jackdaw and the pigeons. A jackdaw, seeing how well some pigeons in a certain dovecote fed, and how happily they lived together, wished much to join them. With this view of his wizened his feathers and slipped in one evening just as it was getting dark. As long as he kept quiet, he escaped notice. But growing bolder by degrees, the feeling very jolly in his new quarters, he burst into hearty laugh. His voice betrayed him, the pigeons set upon him and drove him out. When he would afterwards have joined the jackdaws again, his discolored feathers and his battered state drew attention to him and his former mates. Finding out what he had been at, will let him have no further parts with them. He who pursues two courses succeeds with neither. The fox without a tail. A fox was once caught in a trap by his tail, and in order to get away was forced to leave it behind, knowing that without a tail he would be a laughingstock for all his fellows. He resolved to try to induce them to part with theirs. So at the next assembly of foxes he made a speech on the unprofitableness of tails in general, and the inconvenience of a fox tail in particular, adding that he had never felt so easy as since he had given up his own. When he had sat down, a sly old fellow rose, and waving his long brush with a graceful air, said with a sneer that if, like the last speaker, he had lost his tail, nothing further would have been needed to convince him. But till such an accident should happen, he should certainly vote in favor of tails. Guard against those who would wish you to be reduced to their own level. The mischievous dog. A rascally dog used to run quietly to the heels of every passerby and bite them without warning. So his master was obliged to tie a bell around the cur's neck, that he might give notice wherever he went. This the dog thought very fine indeed, and he went about tinkling in pride all over town. But an old hound said, "Why do you make such a fool of yourself? That bell is not a mark of merit, but of disgrace." Notoriety is often mistaken for fame. The collier and the fuller. A friendly collier meeting one day with a fuller, an old acquaintance of his, kindly invited him to come and share his house. "1,000 thanks for your civility," replied the fuller, "but I am rather afraid that as fast as I make anything clean, you will be smutting it again." Good conduct is often corrupted by false knowledge. The bald knight. A certain knight who wore a wig to conceal his baldness was out hunting one day. A sudden gust of wind carried away his wig and showed his bald pate. His friend all laughed heartily at the odd figure he made, but the old fellow, so far from being put out, laughed as heartily as any of them. "Is it any wonder," said he, "that another man's hair shouldn't keep on my head when my own wouldn't stay there?" Every event has its reason. The eagle and the crow. A crow watched an eagle swoop with a majestic air from the cliff upon a flock of sheep and carry away a lamb in his talons. The whole thing looked so graceful and so easy that the crow at once proceeded to imitate it, and pouncing upon the back of the largest and fattest ram he could see, he tried to make off with it. He found that he could not move the ram, and his claws got so entangled in the animal's fleece that he could not get away himself. He therefore became an easy prey to the shepherd, who coming up at a time caught him, cut his wings, and gave him to his children for a plaything. They came crowding about their father and asked him what a strange bird that was. Why, said he will tell you himself that he's an eagle, but you take my word for it. I know him to be a crow. 'Tis folly to attempt what you are unable to perform. The Owl and the Nightingale. A formal Solomon owl had for many years made his habitation in a grove amongst the ruins of an old monastery, and had pored so often over some mouldy manuscripts, the stupid relics of a monkish library, that he grew infected with the pride and pedantry of the place. Mistaking gravity for wisdom, he would sit whole days with his eyes half shut, fancying himself profoundly learned. It happened as he sat one evening, half buried in meditation and half in sleep, that a nightingale, unlucky, perching near him, began her melodious lays. He started from his reverie, and with a horrid screech interrupted her song. "Begone!" he cried, "thou impertinent minstrel, nor distract with noisy dissonance my sublime contemplation, and no vain strongster, that harmony consists in truth alone, which is gained by a laborious study, and not in languishing notes, fit only to soothe the ear of love-sick maid." "Conceit, pedant," returned the nightingale, "whose wisdom lie only in the feathers that muffled up the unmeaning face. Music is a natural and rational entertainment, and though not adapted to the ears of an owl, has ever seen relished and admired by the best formed minds. It is natural for a pedant to despise those arts that polish our manners, and that would extirpate pedantry. It is natural for a pedant to despise those arts that polish our manners, and that would extirpate pedantry. Caesar and the Slave. During a visit that Tiberius Caesar paid to one of his country residents, he observed that whenever he walked in the grounds, a certain slave was always a little way ahead of him, busily watering the path. Turn which way he would, go where he might, there was the fellow, still fussing about with his watering pot. He felt sure that he was making himself thus needlessly officious in the hope of thereby gaining his liberty. In making a slave free, a part of ceremony consisted of giving a gentle stroke on one side of the face. Hence, when the man came running up in eager expectation at the call of the emperor, the latter said to him, "I have for a long time observed you meddling where you had nothing to do, and while you might have been better employed elsewhere, you have mistaken if you think I can afford a box on the ear at so low a price as you bid for it. Being busy does not always mean being useful." The Man and the Lion. A man and a lion once argued together on which belonged to the noble race. The man called the attention of the lion to a monument on which was sculptured a man striding over a fallen lion. "That proves nothing at all," said the lion. "If a lion had been the carver, he would make the lion striding over the man. Men are but sorry witnesses in their own cause." The Ox and the Frog. An ox grazing in a meadow chanced to set his foot on a young frog and crushed him to death. His brothers and sisters, who were playing near, at once ran to tell their mother what happened. "The monster that did it, mother, was such a size," said they. Their mother, who was a vain old thing, thought that she could easily make herself as large. "Was it as big as this?" she asked, blowing and puffing herself out. "Oh, much bigger than that," replied the young frog. "Is this then?" cried she, puffing and blowing again with all her might. "Nay, mother," said they. "If you were to try till you burst yourself, you would never be so big." Old Frog tried to puff herself out still more, and burst herself indeed. People are ruined by tempting a greatness to which they have no claim. The Fox and the Cat. A fox and a cat traveling together beguiled the tediousness of their journey by moralizing. "Of all the moral virtues," exclaimed the fox, "mercy is surely the noblest. What say you, my sage friend, is it not so?" "Undoubtedly," replied the cat with the most demure contentedness. "Nothing is more becoming in a creature of any sensibility than compassion." While they were thus complimenting each other on the wisdom of their views, a wolf darted out from the wood upon the flock of sheep, which were feeding in an adjacent meadow, and without being in the least affected by the piteous cries of a poor lamb, devoured in before their eyes. "Horrible cruelty!" exclaimed the cat. "Why does he not feed on vermin instead of making his barbarous meals on such innocent creatures?" The fox agreed with his friend in the observation, to which he added some pathetic remarks on the odiousness of such conduct. Their indignation was rising in its warmth and zeal when they arrived at a little cottage by the wayside, where the tender-hearted fox immediately cast his eyes upon a fine cock that was stuttering about the yard. And now, adieu moralizing, he leaped over the pails and without any sort of scruple demolished his prize in an instant. In the meanwhile, a plump mouse, which ran out of the stable, totally put to flight our cat's philosophy, who fell to the repast without the least commiseration. It is common habit to talk of what is right and good, and to do what is quite the reverse. The Ape and the Carpenter. An ape sat looking at a carpenter who was cleaving a piece of wood with 2 wedges, which he put into the cleft, one after another, and the split open, the carpenter leaving his work half done. The ape must needs try his hand at log splitting, and coming to the piece of wood, pulled out the wedges and was in the without knocking in the other. The wood closing again held the poor monkey by his 4 paws so fast that he was not able to get away. The surly carpenter, when he returned, knocked the prisoner's brains out of the medley of his work. It is easier to get into mischiefs than to get out again. The Swallow and the Serpent. A swallow returning from abroad, and ever fond of dwelling with men, built herself a nest in the wall of a court of justice, and there hatched 7 young birds. A serpent gliding past the nest from its hole in the wall ate up the young unfledged nestlings. The swallow, finding her nest empty, lamented greatly and exclaimed, "Woe to me, a stranger, that in this place where all others' rights are protected, I alone should suffer wrong." Do not place too great confidence in outward form. The woodcock and the mallard. A woodcock and a mallard were feeding together in some marshy ground at the tail of a mill pond. Lord said that the squeamish woodcock, "In what is a vocarious and beastly manner do you devour all that comes before you? Neither snail, frog, toad, nor any kind of filth can escape the fury of your enormous appetite. All alike goes down, without measure and without distinction. What an odious vice of gluttony!" "Good lack," replied the mallard, "pray how come you be my accuser, and whence has your excessively delicacy a right to censure my plain eating? Is it a crime to fill one's belly, or is it not indeed a virtue rather, to be pleased with the food which nature offers us? Surely I would sooner be charged with gluttony than with a finical and sickly appetite, on which you are pleased to ground your superiority of taste. What a silly vice is daintiness! Thus endeavouring to palliate their respective passion, our epicures parted with a mutual contempt. The mallard, hasting to devour some garbage, which was in reality a bait, immediately gorged a hook through mere greediness and oversight, while the woodcock, flying through the glade in order to seek his favourite juices, was entangled in a net, spread across it for that purpose, falling each other of them thus a sacrifice to their different but equal. A ferocious appetite and a fondness for daintiness equally distract our attention from more material concerns. The brother and sister. A certain man had 2 children, a boy and a girl. The lad was a handsome young fellow, but the girl was as plain as a girl will be. The sister, provoked beyond endurance by the way in which the brother looked in the glass and made remarks to her disadvantage, went to her father and complained of it. The father drew his children to him very tenderly and said, "My dears, I wish you both to look in the glass every day. You, my son, seeing your face is handsome, may take care not to spoil it by ill temper and bad behavior. And you, my daughter, may be encouraged to make up your want of beauty by the sweetness of your manners and the grace of your conversation. Handsome is as handsome does." The frogs and the fighting bulls. A frog one day, peeping out of the marsh, saw 2 bulls fighting at some distance of the meadow. "Alas, my friend," cried he to his fellow frogs, "whatever will become of us? Why are you so frightened at?" asked one of the frogs. "What are their quarrels have to do with you? They are only proving which shall be the master of the herd." "True," answered the frog, "and it is just that which causes my fear, for the one that is beaten will take refuge here in the marshes, and will tread us to death." And so it happened, and many a frog is dying had sore proof that the fears which he had thought to be groundless were not so in fact. Coming events often cast their shadow before. The leopard and the fox. The leopard one day, in the hearing of the fox, was very loud in the praise in his own beautifully spotted skin. The fox thereupon told him that handsome as he might be, he considered that he himself was yet a greater deal handsomer. "Your beauty is of the body," said the fox. "Mine is of the mind. Beauty is skin deep." The 3 vases. By a lifetime of scraping, a miser once hoarded up a large quantity of gold, which he placed in 3 vases and buried. When at length being on his deathbed, he called his 3 sons to him and informed them of the treasures he had left them, and of the spot in which it lay hid. In 3 separate vases, one for each of them, he could not finish all that he had to say. A fainting fit seized him and he expired. Now, as a young man had never seen these vases, they concluded that in all probability they would differ in size and value, and as their father died before he could assign to each his particular vase, that business must be settled by themselves. Thus, on the division of their wealth, they entered into a warm dispute, each laying claim on the larger vase. One because he was the oldest, the second son because he had no property in land to support him, and the youngest because he was the favorite of his father, and therefore was sure that the largest share should have been bequeathed to him. Had this dying parent been but able to finish his last speech, words at length ran very high and quickly came to blows, from which none of them escaped unhurt, when after all this wrangle, ill blood and mischievous done, it was discovered on digging up the 3 vases that they were exactly equal in size and value. Be sure of your causes before you quarrel. The Lion and the Mouse. A lion, tired from his chase, lay sleeping at full length under the shady tree. Some mice scrambling over him while he slept awoke him, laying in his paw upon one of them. He was about to crush him when the mouse implored his mercy. "Spare me, O king," he said, "and maybe the day will come when I can be of service to you." The lion, tickled with the idea of the mouse helping him, lifted his paw and let the creature go. Some time after, the lion was caught in a net laid by some hunters, and unable to free himself, made the forest resound with his roar. The mouse whose life had been spared came, and with his little sharp teeth soon gnawed the ropes asunder and set the lion free. The least may help the greatest.